Let's just
Cool.
do it. Like, where do you see the where do you see commercial market, and then where do you see commercial, where do you see, okay, where do you see the commercial market? Where do you see kind of the economy with them?
Yeah, so it is definitely, especially nationally, there's a slowdown with the commercial market. A lot of the um, publications and reports that I read, there's definitely a major slowdown. If you look at the numbers from this year versus last year, there's a major slowdown nationally, and there's a slowdown here locally as well. So, but like I said, the main thing is that there's opportunity though for buyers and tenants right now that there wasn't before and everything. So the biggest, it depends a little bit on this sector. It's still crazy tight for industrial, particularly small industrial. I'm still not seeing a lot of availability locally, although I'm seeing more stuff coming on the market, but it's still pretty tight and it still sells pretty quickly. Retail is still pretty strong. There's still a lot of demand. I have a lot of retail clients right now. Even with the economy, they seem to be doing pretty well, and they still seem to be wanting to expand. And there's more opportunities now. Rates are still very high, and in a lot of cases, depending on the quality of the center, they're getting it still. We saw crazy rates last year in retail, numbers that I hadn't seen since early 2000s. But for quality centers, they're seeing those right now and they're getting those. Just depends a lot on the center. I mean, there's retail rates are kind of all over the board. I just did a small lease for $12 a foot. And then, there's regular shopping centers, not even malls, that are like over $40 a foot. And I've even seen a couple asking over 50. And so there's just a huge disparity in terms of lease rates on the retail side. So but there's definitely a slowdown there. It definitely affects whether the client is a cash client or they're looking to finance, because we know one of the problems of the financing is that they're looking at minimum 7% on financing, probably closer to 8%, depending on their experience and their credit worthiness. So that definitely makes a lot of projects not viable, and then we have a disconnect because cap rates are still pretty low. They've risen, but not to the point where if you're borrowing most of the purchase cost, they don't make a lot of sense on there. So from an investor's point of view, so just depends on the project. So we need cap rates to rise a little bit more, I think, based on the interest rates, because I don't think interest rates are necessarily coming down a lot. I think this is going to be kind of the new normal in terms of commercial, which is actually just a normal. Like everybody thinks it's crazy high, but we really just had crazy low for a couple of years there. So it's really just what interest rates are normally in the commercial world. So they could come down a little bit. That'd be nice, but they're not crazy high. And we just need a cap rates to line up with interest rates. And so far buyers or sellers are having a hard time coming to terms with that. Office, on the other hand, though, go ahead.
So cap rates that I'm seeing are like 7-8%. Is that kind of what you're seeing too?
Yeah, so seeing somewhere around the 7 to 8% on the cap rates and everything. So you know, I still see lower than that actually, particularly for industrial. You know, I'll see 6%. I know even multifamily, it's risen, but it's still higher. You know, it was below 4. But cap rates for multifamily still, you know, maybe 4.5. I haven't looked at the exact numbers, but just exactly that's what basically what I've been seeing. Retail 7 to 8, office probably similar to that on office. So an office is completely there's just so much sublet on the market right now. That office, I have an office listing, and almost entirely the only interest we've had in the space has been almost entirely behavioral health. So I had no idea there were so many behavioral health clients out there, but there's a ton of them. So so there's not a lot of office demand. There's still office demand to purchase. In fact, you know, I have a few clients that are looking to purchase office, and it's not a bad time to purchase office right now. So I think that I don't think the office is going away by any stretch of the imagination. I think the usage is less, and there may be, you know, there's not a lot being built, and there's still, you know, 70,000-80,000 people moving here a year, and so there's still demand for office. People are still more productive in the office than they are not in the office. So so that's kind of basically where we're at on that. So I'm trying to think. I think I covered everything on that. Any other questions?
No, that's kind of what I'm feeling and seeing myself. So that just confirms everything. When you were saying behavioral health, you didn't realize there were so many behavioral health clients, but it took me 8 months to find 1,000 square feet for a small med spa. And I never realized how many med spas and salons there are. And literally they're like everywhere. They're like on every corner. And so I now have another med spa client that's looking for more space than 1,000 square feet, which may or may not be helpful in my search. But yeah, it's you know, it's one of those kind of sectors that are doing very well.
Yeah.
People need their beauty. I get it because I'm a client. And I don't know. That's an area where I think people hold back a little bit during the recession, but they want to feel good about themselves, especially women, and they don't miss their haircut and their color and whatever. So, and all the other things that go along with med spas. So just an observation I made.
Yeah, I have a similar. I have a client who either wants to he prefer to open a cigar bar with a wine, but he's been in the smoke shop business, so he'd also open a smoke shop, but he doesn't want to be near another smoke shop. Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit like the med spas and everything. Yeah. So he just, you know, I'm like, every center I look at, I mean, there's either a smoke shop in it or there's a smoke shop across the street or something.
Exactly. So I was looking for a smoke shop space for a client as well. And either, you had one already there or one across the street for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, retail's strong in the Phoenix market. You know, there's, you know, unless you know, I mean, there's some big boxes available. You know, and of course, the smaller the space, the more demand there is for it. Mm-hmm. Both retail and office too. I mean, if you want to sublease, there's lots of opportunities to sublease big offices, you know, 10,000 feet or more and everything. So, but, you know, finding smaller offices is getting better actually. So, but that's kind of what we're seeing and everything in the market right now. So you have you found a location for your med spa client then?
Yes, and she referred me to a friend of hers. And now I'm on the search for, 3,000 square feet in the East Valley. I don't know if you've also noticed too, a lot of the salon, they call them salon suites. So it's like a big box and then they subdivide it into like 12 by 12 spaces.
Yeah,
Have you noticed that, Mara? That
yeah, it's a big business, actually.
yeah, and that's huge. And I have a client of mine that was looking to purchase one. The owner was really sick, and I kind of, advised her what she should ask for, before she makes the purchase. And he wasn't really ready to divulge any of the tax returns and stuff. So she backed out of that, which I was glad, because it was just like, that's normal. Any normal person that's gonna make a purchase like that's gonna want to see the financials, and he wasn't willing to disclose it. So anyway, that was one of those salon suites.
Good, good. Well, I think it's almost 10:15, and so I don't think we're getting anybody else on here today. Just wanted to, we had done a couple trainings earlier this year. So we did one training class at the beginning of the year, hosted by Ben Shern, who did the inspections, commercial inspections, and he kind of went over what he did on kind of the inspection period. And then we had Eric Wolf from Chicago Title last month do a presentation on commercial title reports and go through those. I think those are both real good. If you haven't, I think both of you were on that, both those calls. If not, I know they're recorded, so you can go on and take a look at them. But basically, the only thing I really wanted to do today was just kind of basically answer, we really didn't get a chance to do a lot of Q&A because those took up the whole hour. So answer any questions on the due diligence process for commercial and kind of go through, any differences between commercial and residential. But we don't have a lot of new people on today. So, I mean, both of you have experience, so it's not a lot of huge difference in everything. So
I found, Sean, that the commercial inspection, I knew it was going to be a little more detailed and thorough, but I was really impressed with how much detail and how much they really do dig in to give you a bigger picture of what you're purchasing, what the buyer's purchasing. Because I don't know, that guy was so knowledgeable on everything, and it just seemed, I know there's the basic requirements for a home inspector, but on commercial, it really, to me, was like, you can really feel good about referring an inspector like that to your client, because they're going to get everything and more than they ever wanted in the inspection.
Yeah, Ben does a great job. And one of the things, some of the things I like about is that he gives numbers, which a lot of inspectors won't give. And so, which makes it good for going back, because a commercial inspection is different than a residential inspection. Residential inspection is more cosmetic, more this needs to be fixed, that needs to be fixed. And commercial inspection is more looking for deferred maintenance. It's looking for zoning. It's making sure that it meets all the legal requirements. And so, and whether the use is going to work for the property, and less about, whether there's, scratches on the wall or whatever. And so it's less cosmetic, but he gives solid numbers, when it comes to the expenses that the buyer is going to look to expend, and not even just initially, he forecasts those out, 5-10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the buyer really knows, because commercial is much more about the numbers. And so the buyer really knows like what their expenses are going to be, going forward. And it makes it, and then usually what I do is, if I get that deferred maintenance, that, then I, get out, and he's not trying to sell anything. So, but at that point, I usually get an HVAC contractor or a roofer or whatever out there, to give a quote. And then to kind of back that up too, and then that helps for going to get a credit. Because again, with commercial, as you guys know, it's not usually about having them fix something. It's more about getting a credit toward the purchase price. And then the buyer either completes or doesn't complete those, repairs after they buy the property. So, but he's really detailed. I didn't even realize that he could do phase one. There's a different, Judd Bowers does phase ones too. But I didn't realize, that he can do phase one inspections as well. So, which is, depending on a lot of banks will require, there be a phase one, and depending on the use and the previous use of the property, phase ones are crucial to get as well. So just depends a lot on the type of property and what the previous use was on the property. Ben, I'll also do if you have clients like wanting to lease space and everything. So he can also do those, and he doesn't charge those very much at all. I mean, it's not just for the purchases. I've used him twice for tenants. And that's good too, because a lot of times, we write in the leases, that we're, taking all the systems in good working condition. But, sometimes that stuff is latent and you don't know it till months after you're into the lease. And then you're in a dispute with the landlord that you don't necessarily need to be in. So it's good to know get the condition of those systems up front, so that can be addressed at the beginning of the lease, and not a question of whether it was existing or whether it's ongoing maintenance, because tenants are generally responsible for ongoing maintenance. Not all cases, but in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a good job. The other one that we didn't talk a lot about, and he didn't talk, is, a lot of times a survey. And, one thing I do is I always recommend a survey, just because we don't want the liability if something comes up later on. In most cases with commercial property in Arizona, surveys are not necessary, but obviously if there's a problem that comes up later on that could have been discovered by a survey, you don't want that to come back on you or Bliss. And so I always recommend a survey. I would say most of the time the client doesn't get it. And a lot of times, first thing we do is we ask for it. And actually more recently, I'm finding that a lot of the purchase deals we've had them actually receive them from the seller. So it's not, always ask for them. And, sometimes they even come up during due diligence searches. Title searches. So even occasionally, but they are valuable to have. I think they're always a good, I think every property owner should probably have a survey. I do always recommend it.
If there was a survey done 10 years ago, would you want a new survey, or would that 10-year survey be acceptable to use and have?
It depends on the property. So a lot of times the bank's the one who drives the survey. So, the bank can answer that question. And it depends on the property, and it depends on changes in the neighborhood and everything. So I would still probably recommend it, but just to cover us, but it's probably fine if it was done 10 years ago. Like I said, a lot of the commercial properties here it's not necessary, but that you don't want it coming back on you that there was some sort of problem that could have been discovered on a survey and you didn't recommend that there wasn't a survey done. So I just always try to do that in an email with the client, right off the bat in the due diligence, because they're probably the longest. So we just sold a property, and the buyer, I was representing the seller, but the buyer did a phase one in a week. It was pretty amazing. So we We held them down like on a 30-day due diligence, and they got these guys out and but it was the people who bought it were going to do a laundromat, so it was required to have a phase one. It was not a laundromat, but they're making it a laundromat. And and they got a phase one done in 7 days. So if you ever, selling it and the buyer's trying to tell you that they need, 2 months or something to get it done, I think you can get phase ones done in 30 to 45 days. Surveys, though, I don't know. I haven't ordered one in a while. Last year, they were running 2 months. They're probably better right now, I would expect, because of the slowdown and there's not as many transactions. So there's not as much work for them. But actually, I know a guy that can probably turn it around. If you guys need people that need to turn around surveys or phase ones on a quick basis, let me know. So they're not taking as long as you would think they would take. So if it takes to get a deal done doing a quick close, there's people I know that can do that. We want to verify it ahead of time before you commit to a quick close. But those are the big three: is the property inspection, the survey, and phase one. I think the longest time. Hi, Liz.
Hello.
Hey, Stella. So,
Hi, Sean.
how are you? How are you, Stella?
I am doing great, and you?
Good. So, Liz, we're just kind of talking about it's basically just kind of a roundtable and a Q&A on due diligence, just kind of following up on the completing the discussion we kind of started earlier this year with the inspections and the title report and everything. So we're just talking about due diligence and the differences. So, I mean, obviously the largest difference is the length of time. Standard on a commercial deal is 30 days. The biggest thing that's going to make it longer is if you financing, and particularly if it's SBA financing, you probably need at least 60 days on SBA financing, depending on where your buyer is at in the financing process. But SBAs are really, really slow if they're doing SBA financing. So, and then, obviously we're talking about the major components, property inspection, survey, the phase one, doing a phase one environmental report, depending on the property, if it's land or something, we can also have, soil testing, is something that would be needed to be done. Trying to think what else I'm missing. And then the title report, obviously, with the title report, we want to check CC&Rs. One of the main components of the due diligence for a commercial property is your client going to be able to use the property for which they intend. So, you've got to verify that. Through the city and through zoning. So, by the way, I have a contact with a guy. He does this mainly for the cannabis industry, but he does it for he can do it for everybody. He used to be a city planner, and he can do zoning type things cheaper than architects can. So if you need help with zoning or for approvals, or if you've got a client looking to get approvals, architects are a little bit like attorneys in the fact that their meter is always running. And so, it can get expensive for clients to use an architect to do all the zoning, which they obviously can. But it might be worthwhile for them to talk to this guy, because he at least he says, I haven't used it personally, but he says that he can do it cheaper than architects does, and he has a lot of experience. He quote unquote speaks city. So that's obviously one of the big contingencies. So, and obviously, you need to verify zoning on a commercial deal. he just the other day, I have a Montessori client, and I actually, he actually helped me out because I read the zoning thing a little bit differently than he did. And I thought the zoning would be fine on a property, and I had him look at it, and he said it would have to go through a zoning change. So, you know, that was a potential pitfall that he actually helped me identify and everything. So, because I don't know if any of you have ever read the zoning the zoning stuff for cities, but it's some complicated stuff, and you know, and so it's good to have either the users or the client's architect or someone else who's an expert in that field make that determination. So we can do some preliminary determinations, but you know, you don't want to make that assertion for your client. You know, that's something that needs to be done during the due diligence period.
Hey, Sean, can I make a suggestion for a future meeting?
Mm-hmm.
I am getting ready to do a 1031 with a client, and if we could have somebody speak on that, like, I mean, he doesn't have any proof of funds, obviously, because he's got to do a 1031 and sell his property, and it has to be under contract, and you know, all that, how that procedure works. I think it would be helpful to get an in-depth from a 1031 exchange company, and I have one if you're interested in reaching out to them for a topic.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that would be great. I know Sheila Long has done one for Bliss in the past.
Okay.
But yeah, send me your contact but yeah, I think that would be a good class. So
Great.
I think the other one that I was thinking about doing you know, sometime soon would be to go over the commercial purchase contract and the differences. I know we're kind of working backwards in the sequence, but you know, go over the commercial purchase contract and the differences and some of the key components there. So it'd be another good class.
Yeah, attorneys like to X out our contract and you know, charge for their language when it's exactly the same thing almost to the T.
Hey, watch it.
Are you an attorney?
Just a little.
Oh, okay. You
He's
know,
recovering.
they're doing their job, obviously, but you know, we had attorneys write our contracts, so I respect our contract because it does protect both sides. And you know, no, I'm not dissing attorneys, but it's all written on one side for their client. So
Yeah, it's okay. We're just trained to love our words.
yeah, I understand completely, and I respect that as well.
Yeah, I just completed a deal where the agreement wasn't the LOI to use, because I always try to write it in the LOI that we're going to use the AAR purchase contract, because it's a very fair contract to both parties, and it protects the brokers very well. It's actually primarily designed to protect the brokers as best as possible. And so I got that in the LOI. And of course, the buyer or the other party had an attorney. And then they had like, I don't know how many recommendations to change the contract. And I'm like, it says right. And so I was going back and forth, and I'm like, you know, it says right there, this is covered and everything. But it was just no offense, Liz, but it was the attorney trying to justify their, you know, their expense to their client, and you know, trying to justify that there was money well spent and everything.
Right,
so
right.
Actually, one suggestion I have for you, because I have to admit that there are times when I always use the forms, of course, but there are times when there's language in the forms that makes me nervous. I don't think they're crafted as well as they could be. And a lot of that's been cleared out with some of the new iterations of forms that's come out. But one thing you might do when an attorney is trying to change language is ask them specifically why they think that language is better than the AAR language. And sometimes they won't be able to tell you. Sometimes they are just justifying their fee. But sometimes they have a good reason. You know, it's fair to ask, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. So that's a good suggestion. So I know the one I was working with, they were a franchise, the buyer was a franchise, and they kept wanting to put, you know, including franchise or approval in there, which I was fine with it and everything, because it didn't change anything. It was perfectly already covered in the due diligence that, you know, they didn't need to put that in there. But, you know, that was one of the things that it certainly wasn't a deal breaker either way. It's just, it was kind of unnecessary language, but they insisted on that being in there. But that's a good point is that, you know, just ask them, okay, why do you want to add that language? Why is the existing language not in there? So good suggestion. So, but yeah, the one problem I always have with if one attorney for one of the two parties drafts it is kind of like what Kathy was saying, is it's completely one-sided. And so you just have a lot more work to do to get it equal. So,
Absolutely, because that attorney is retained to hire only the client and not all the parties. So I think you're absolutely right, Sean. You know, putting in, you know, stating somewhere in the agreement, you know, or somewhere in the marketing materials that, you know, the AAR agreement will be used. And then you can say, well, fine, it's a starting premise, but we're going to start there. And if they don't want to use it, then I would be very mistrustful of their motives.
yeah, there's a I can't remember my brain's not functioning, but there's a commercial contract provider, and the name is escaping me right now. I'll remember it and send it out. But they do California and Arizona contracts for commercial, and you can subscribe to it. And I think it costs like $500, and then then you get like a certain number of uses out of it. And I haven't subscribed to it, but I have done a deal where we used the purchase contract from that, and it was a very good. It was actually in some ways it was a better contract than the AAR contract, and it was very fair to both sides as well. So hopefully
that would be good. That'd be good information to have.
Yeah, hopefully by the end of the call I'll remember. Actually, I might be able to look it up and everything. So
yeah, don't feel bad. I have days when I get up and I'm thinking, and my name is.
Well, I've never actually used it. So I mean, I'm sorry, I haven't used it. We have used it for a deal, but I've never used it myself and everything. So, and it's a service, but it's a good contract. If we didn't have access to the AAR, I would probably use it.
One of the best classes I took was we dissected every section of the residential purchase contract. So if we do that, Sean, for commercial, that I think will open a lot of eyes. I mean, it'll take some time, but being able to summarize each section is so important to understand. And you know, it's not like you need to know it front to back, but it really, you appreciate how much time was put in to protect all parties, including the brokerage and everything, because it really is, you know, they put some thought into it, and definitely worthwhile for, I think, everybody to understand the contract.
Yeah. Yeah, you should know. I mean, just like in residential, it's the same. You know, your contract the contract is your domain, and you should know it. You know, you should know it, what every clause means to your client, to either client, and to yourself and everything. So, and go through it, because it is your guideline, it is your roadmap for the transaction. So, and particularly on commercial, you know, there's not, you know, I tell people all the time, particularly in the leasing side, there's no protections for commercial tenants, you know, going back to leasing and everything. So, you know, the court will just go to the lease. There's no, everybody, sometimes people have the misconception that the Arizona Landlord Tenant Act applies to commercial, and it doesn't. So, there's not any protections for a commercial tenant. It is a contract between two parties, and everything goes back to the lease. The court will look at it. So, and so there's a misconception when people that don't have a lot of experience in owning businesses in commercial world get into a commercial lease that they somehow have protection that they don't. So
yeah, George and I had a client that was an attorney, and he was signing a lease and he wanted to change. He had his changes and George went, time out. We're not going to be able to change this. This is pretty much written by their attorneys. It's pretty much cookie cutter. And, he just unfortunately had to put him in his place and say, we can't, they're not going to accept it, any of your changes. But that's what attorneys do. And I understand he was looking to put more protection on himself.
yeah, that's true. Although I've seen a lot, in some of the bigger leases I've done, first of all, in the leases, I always try to get my client to have an attorney. A lot of times I do, first of all, is from a personal standpoint, is lease reviews are time consuming. And then also I want my client to be protected. So I do usually recommend that my tenant clients have their attorney review them. The one thing I do for the tenants is for my tenant clients is I say, I will negotiate the changes. I just want your attorney to review it. And that's another thing that kind of covers you and covers the brokerage as well, is they've had an attorney take a look at the lease. So if anything ever happened in the future, you're covered. So I do actually have, for my clients, have the attorney draft comments, and then I usually go back and it depends on the situation, but a lot of times you can get stuff changed or modified. It's a lot of work. Leases, lease deals can actually be a lot more time consuming than sales. Just because a commercial, I always explain it to clients this way: is it a sale, you're done at the end of the day. When it closes, you're done with the other party. But a lease is an ongoing relationship. And so it's a little more negotiation and a little more investigation by both parties going forward, because you're not just taking a property and having the property. You're going to have an ongoing relationship with this other entity for 5, 10, 20 years. And so there's a lot more to a commercial lease than there is to a purchase contract. And that's the reason why. So it is in depth. And so you can, but and most of the time there's not a lot you can do. I always find it tough to do too much on the default area, because they always throw back, well, are you planning on defaulting and everything? But you can change timelines, and you can get longer time periods. There's definitely things you can do in the leases to to change them. So I do recommend, and I've done literally hundreds of leases, because that's my previous life, doing leases. So but they're a challenge, and I don't like to, that's the other reason I like to have attorneys go through them, is that doing the lease reviews themselves is extremely time consuming. To do it right takes several hours. So
Great.
but if you've got like a 3-page lease and someone's leasing 1,000 square feet, they're probably not going to hire an attorney to review it or something. So for 3 years. Cool. Well, we can do any other questions or comments. That was some good suggestions for any other ideas for future. We heard 1031, the purchase contract. Any other suggestions for future trainings or lunch and learns or? Nope. All right, cool. Any other questions in general? All right, well, good. Well, I'll try to set those up, sometime in the future to try to do some trainings on that. And I think that's about it. And you
Sean?
guys, oh yeah,
John, are all our meetings from here on in going to be on Zoom?
I think so. It depends a
Okay.
little bit on it. It seems to, well, I don't know. We had a really good turnout for the inspection one. So we had about 8 or 9 people in the office, and then we had a few people on Zoom too. So the good thing about Zoom is that anybody can join, and we can also record it so people can watch it later too. So they will be at the minimum in hybrid, so that they're recorded and on Zoom. So, but there may be a topic that we do, particularly if we have an outside vendor coming in, like Ben or Eric, we may come in and do in the office. So it's also good to have that face. It's also good to have that face to face from time to time. So.
Gotcha.
Cool.
I'm just asking because, I just kind of want a little warning so that on commercial meeting day, I know whether I need to get up and shower. That's all.
Yep. So, well, cool. All right. Well, everybody have a great day, and thanks for coming, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, guys, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sean. Have a nice day.
Thanks.